Welcome to Ashley on CBD, your one-stop podcast where we drop the truth on all things CBD and maybe some pop culture too. Stick around as we delve deep into the practical health benefits of CBD for you.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is episode 3 with Guy Needler, the author of The Origin Speaks, a direct dialogue with the ultimate creator. In this episode, we talk about power, sentience, and we even talk a little bit about suicide, and Guy gives some helpful pointers on how to think about that and how to deal with it if there's anybody in our audience who's either gone through it or is hopefully not contemplating it. But if so, there's some guidance here for you. Really hope you enjoyed the show. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Hello. As always, we're brought to you by Magic Immunity. This is a new mushroom tea that I've been drinking to help build my immune system to be stronger, as well as to give me healthy lungs, healthy heart, and healthy gut. And I also love the fact that it's a neuro-optimizer, meaning that it's going to help my brain remain calm, help give me calm, focused energy, and never get the jitters. There's not caffeine in this. Instead, this is packed with life, as they say. Meaning that it contains 4 medicinal mushrooms, reishi, lion's mane, chaga, and cordyceps, as well as 12 other organic and natural adaptogens, including cacao, ginger, and turmeric. Give it a try. You can get Magic Immunity on Amazon or at packedwithlife.com. Hope you try it. It tastes great. I'm drinking it right now. On ice. Yummy. Taste the health right there. Have a great day.
Well, great to see you again, and thank you so much. I really enjoyed our last conversation. We didn't get through nearly any of all stuff. So thank you so much for being gracious to join us again. Had great feedback on the first couple of parts we've released, and if you're okay, I'd just kind of like to jump in. One of the questions that I had right away. Cool. One of the questions I had right away was, one of the takeaways I hear is that there are 3 main forces in our Source Entity 1 multiverse: power, wisdom, and love. And each one must be worked with equally for an entity to be successful. So my question, I think I get wisdom and love, but what is meant by power?
Power is the ability to use your wisdom in a service-based and robust and reasonable way. So power is being able to use what you've got properly. It's some people call power being able to coerce people. Some people call power being able to create things. Some people call power the ability to generate energy. And for me, it's all about your ability to influence things. So power is being in your own power, your ability to manipulate your environment, to be able to argue your case effectively and efficiently, to be able to do what you're doing, to create whatever you want to create, to be successful in your career, to be successful in your spiritual advancement, to if you're building a house, use your hands properly to do it. It's all about doing things in a way which is going to be successful. So your power is really, if I put it holistically, it's about doing whatever you're doing in a successful and robust way that is going to benefit not just you, but everybody else around you. And that includes the environment and any sort of animal friends that you've got that are part of it. So whatever you do it well. And that's basically having the right power.
Mm-hmm. Do you you kind of alluded to that, some people go down a different path with power, more of controlling other people, right? And or I guess more selfishly applied power. How do we, no judgment, no good or bad, but how do we see that? How do we deal with that in our, because a lot of us don't behave that way, but we're under the rule, so to speak, of those who do.
Well, how do we do it? Oh, you mean how do we work around those people who've got power over us? Is that probably the right question. Or how do we accept it?
Yeah, how do we accept it? How do we? I mean, I've had my own this, you know, with and now I don't pay attention to the news. I don't. I just don't. I don't have any interest in that anymore. But you know, I went through some struggles. I know a lot of listeners probably are as well. And you know, any advice that you could give to them to help, you know, to not be, you know, subjugated to that power, quote unquote.
Well, the most important thing is not to be phased by it, or not to be controlled by it. Now, that doesn't mean you should ride roughshod over the law, because the law is there to assist everybody. You know, and it's there to help us maintain a civil society that is able to provide for people. But really, what we should be doing is understanding that, you know, even our leaders are corrupt, and even those around us can be corrupt in some way. You know, we've all. I don't think there's anybody who hasn't stolen a pencil or a pen or a notepad from work. You know, so we have to sort of understand that
Sure.
there are ways to work with it. And my understanding is, and my feeling is, that as long as you know what's going on and you're aware of what's going on, then you can work within it or around it, whilst not upsetting the status quo. And that means that when we find out that, for instance, with the COVID fiasco, it's a complete worldwide debacle. The truth about it certainly isn't being broadcast. But as long as you understand the truth, you don't need to go around and protest and make a big noise about it. You just need to know that, well, as long as you understand it and you understand the depth and detail surrounding it, and that doesn't mean that everybody's got to do that, but if you're that way inclined, you can. Then you can work around it. For example, and I'm using myself as an example here. I understand that I don't need to have any of the COVID-19 vaccinations. I understand that they are all benign. You can ignore any of the conspiracy theories, and I don't really want it or need it. However, if I'm going to do my work, and that means to allow us to continue to travel around the world and do the workshops and for the healing and the traversing the frequencies and lectures, that I need to be able to, at the moment, have taken the vaccine so I can travel seamlessly.
Right.
So it's understanding all of this, but still working with it. It's not quite going with the flow, but it's working with the mechanism in the right way, and understanding that yes, people are going to be scared about it, and yes, people aren't going to be able to fly without a certificate or an app that shows you've had it. But as long as you work with it and say, okay, this is the world at the moment, let them get on with it. I'll navigate around and through it. That's the thing to do. So when you see this thing about power being misappropriated by various different individuals, you know, as low down as your own friends and colleagues, and as high up as government figures,
mm-hmm.
You just have to look at it and go, okay, what's the truth surrounding this, and just work with it and work around it. The whole point of incarnation is to navigate around the physical and the interactions that people have within the physical, and everything surrounding that. You know, the circumstances we find ourselves into, and the discussions we have, and the environments we have. As long as we can manipulate it, not manipulate's the wrong word, navigate, I should have said, navigate around everything that's there, mm-hmm. in a way which is not going to upset what's there, but not going to upset what we're supposed to be doing. And we're doing it in a law-abiding way, by the way, mm-hmm. not breaking the law. Then fine. Let people be controlled by it. Let people be scared by it. Let people take joy by it. The enlightened individual will just be able to is able to recognize what the greater reality is surrounding them, and just work with it. And that way, you don't get upset, you don't get worried, you don't get bothered, you don't get anxious, you don't get panic attacks, and you just carry on working in a way which you know is going to be beneficial to you and your work and the people around you that you're supposed to be supporting. And that's my particular advice is understand the truth and work around it, navigate around it.
Great. Am I interpreting this correctly then, like by doing what you're saying and putting that back into the context of the Origin Speaks, am I influencing the event space in a positive way then by understanding that situation and remaining positive within it? And then therefore, since event space is programmed to work out, which I think is still one of the most beautiful truths there is, right? Then we're going to, then things are going to be okay, I guess, so to speak, or most simply.
Yeah, eventually you'll get to a situation where enough individuals will be thinking, behaving, and acting in the same way. And when that happens, we don't get a critical mass, but we do get a number of individuals who start to create localized event spaces that will change the way that group and everything within the environment works. So we start to change our own event space. We start to change the reality within the event space into something that we prefer to exist within. And so those individuals move with you or start to gradually move into it with you. And then eventually you get a larger number of people, and eventually, hopefully, it'll affect the world. The thing is not to worry about how fast it is. Just know that once people start to understand the reality behind the real reality behind things, and you recognize that and still work with it, but work around it, so to speak, you work in between the lines, then eventually your work will affect other people through one of two different ways of triangulation, or the direct through a straight line triangulation, or group-based or area-based triangulation. And eventually that will grow. And so at some point, irrespective of how convincing the, shall we say, the untruth is, people will start to understand what the real truth is, and they'll just ignore it, and eventually that truth will come out as being an untruth, and people will start to be in terms of their real understanding of what the real truth is, because the untruth will come out as being a lie. And those who perpetuated or perpetrated the lie will be seen for what they are, and eventually it'll all come out, and we go back onto a track where we're a higher frequency civilization. Well,
from my understanding of just reading your work, it has to. So it's just a matter of, I mean, we have to be patient maybe, right? But it absolutely has to. So again,
it's having faith.
Right.
Just to give a fantastic example of faith and dedication to knowing what the truth is. Paramahansa Yogananda a long time ago did a small story about two frogs, and these two frogs managed to hop into a milk farm, and by being unlucky, they jumped into a pail of milk that was there, and they kept swimming around and around. They couldn't get out, of course, because the pail of the bucket the walls were too tall. And they kept talking to each other about this. We've got to keep swimming, got to keep swimming, got to keep swimming. And eventually the one gave up. He said, I can't swim anymore. This is ridiculous. We're just going to keep swimming and get exhausted. And so eventually that one frog decided it would just drown itself because it couldn't cope with it. But the other frog kept going. And he said, well, at least I'm going to try, keep trying and keep trying and keep trying. And eventually its feet started to feel solid ground or semi-solid ground beneath it. And what had happened, it swam round often and often enough to create sort of butter. And that was enough for it to sort of push its back legs on and spring out of the bucket. So basically it's about keeping swimming.
I love it.
It's a fantastic story about keeping on, even in the face of adversity. Because in the face of adversity, the dedicated individual to the truth will ultimately win.
So that just spurns a question that is kind of off track on my line of questioning, but I feel like I need to ask it. So, because a lot of this whole last year has been crazy for so many people, as we talked about, and I don't want to get into that at all. But the travesty of it has been, suicide rates have been going crazy, right? So, what does your knowledge and your conversations, what does that mean? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's a good plan for a lot of reasons, but what does it mean energetically for those who've kind of experienced this in our listenership? Like, what is suicide, I guess, in terms of the progression?
Suicide is the termination of the incarnation that's outside of the plan, outside of the life plan, and it's not good. People think that they're getting out of an unbearable circumstance by committing suicide, but all they're creating is an even worse circumstance, because they create so much karmic debt. It takes thousands of lives to recover it.
Yeah.
Basically, we have 5 termination points within a life where we can get out of that incarnation and not accrue any sort of evolutionary debt or karma. Basically, need to come back, and they are each of these termination points allow us to leave the incarnation seamlessly as a result, and we either go or we don't. And that can be by accident, it can be by disease, it can be by things that shouldn't happen to the body, like sudden heart attacks. All of these different things can come into it that create the possibility of us leaving that incarnation. Suicide is generally not one of them, without doubt. Although I know of 2 people who committed suicide and they were allowed to, because they had an agreement, an energetic agreement, that they could leave because of what they'd done and what they'd experienced. And Dolores Cannon knew of one, and I knew of the other. So the other one is like a remote understanding, not an actual understanding. The first one was somebody who was a reader of mine and is now a friend of mine. So, and I shan't mention any names, but basically they were allowed to go. And that is a real honor. And that means that their guide and helpers have created a termination point for them, where there's no downstream functions exist after their suicide. So, but normally when people commit suicide, they in their life plan, they should be getting over it. They should be getting over the psychological issues. They should have been seeking help, for example, because when they do commit suicide, there is still an expectation that they're going to be interfacing with all these different people, interacting with all these different people further on down, and then others will be interfacing with them, and others will be interfacing with them. So you get all these fractalized interactions that occur over the existence of the individual that suddenly are cut off. Mm-hmm. And so all of these opportunities for experiencing things, learning things, and evolving that other people would have experienced, or other incarnates would have experienced, and it includes animals downstream, suddenly don't have that. So you can have thousands of interactions, right, millions of interactions downstream that should have happened, that don't happen. And these interactions create some form of learning and therefore some form of evolutionary progression. So those individuals lose out. And you have to regroup all that, or repay it, or help them get that back.
Right.
When you're back in the energetic. And it's just mind-bogglingly difficult.
Yeah.
I think one of the books, maybe in the End Dialogues, I think it was something like tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of lives it takes to rekindle, to regroup, or recover, I should say, the evolutionary content that is lost by all these individuals downstream of you committing suicide, because the expectation was you would recover.
Right.
So suicide is not an option at all. I mean, you really should forget about those 2 individuals I've mentioned that did have permission. They are so rare. It's almost impossible to get. But it has happened, and so I know of one person, and Dolores Cannon knew of another person, and we were both amazed that we'd spotted somebody. We were both amazed that we spotted somebody, but in real terms, it doesn't happen, and that's you just can't you cannot do it. People do it, but they're causing so many downstream problems. I mean, the very best thing that can happen to them
Tragedy.
is that the people downstream forgive them and
Right.
sever the karmic link and the evolutionary debt link with them, so that they can at least get back into, trying to recover faster. And that's the best service that people can give. Is if you expected something to happen and the person who's going to do it for you commit suicide, forgive them, unequivocally.
Yeah.
Not just because it's the right thing to do, but because downstream there's lots of things that's going to affect them in the energetic, and they're going to have to recover from.
Well, that's great advice right there. That gives a lot of people hope, I think. That's wonderful. Wonderful advice.
And also that one thing for anybody out there who's contemplating it, I've explained it's a bigger problem than you're in right now, definitely most significantly. But there's always people who can help you. What you think of as a big problem is actually easily solvable by somebody else. So don't be embarrassed about, don't get anxious about, don't get panicky about asking somebody else. Even if you think that they will think you're stupid, they won't. They'll be there to help. A good soul will always help somebody in distress.
Yeah, I think that's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
Well, okay. Shifting gears. I thank you. That was a little off the line, like I said, but hopefully we can help somebody with that conversation. One of the things I want to talk about is, I don't want to get too deep into to sentience necessarily, but I'm very interested in you talk about the source entity one uniquely assigns sentience to execute the learning opportunities. And that source entity one, which is our source entity for those who are listening or haven't gone further into your works yet, the automated the process. Can we talk about what that means? What is that? Is that the result, or is one of the results of that process backfill people, or?
Yeah, well, basically this, I mean, just to sort of put everything straight, source entity one wasn't the first source entity to be created. It's just, I call it source entity one. I call our creator, our source, our God, source entity one, because it's the first source entity I got in contact with. That's the only reason for it being called source entity one. And then the other source entities were called source entity 1, 2, 3 through to 12, because that was the order I picked up on these different source entities, and I called them that.
Got it.
That's it. They're not actually called that. That's just me.
Just the order of sequencing that they appeared to you.
It's me putting a label on them.
Yeah.
But in terms of what the source did is it created like an automatic function, like a program within itself that allowed the division of sentience from itself in a or a chunk of its sentience to be divided up into smaller individualized units that we know as our true energetic selves. We sometimes call it our godheads, or our oversouls, or our higher self. But the thing is, in creating this automatic function, it gave itself the opportunity to have a rest, as I call it, or take its eye off the ball, is another way of saying it. And what happened is that this created a condition where the sentience wasn't all created in equality, or should I say, wasn't divided in equality. That's a better way of saying, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And so what we have is true energetic selves, or godheads, or oversouls, that have different levels of quality of sentience, or different volumes of quality, or different weight, or whatever you want to, densities, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. And that created different demarcations of sentience associated to the energy that was also individualized. And so what we've got is this sort of understood hierarchy of sentience and energy, which goes from just simply being in the cosmos, for those who incarnate, to potentially those who incarnate as minerals, those who incarnate as plants, those who incarnate as animals, those who we know now as the backfill people, and the sentience that's associated with what we are. For example, we are the highest level of sentience, and our level is achieved in one of two ways. Generally, it's achieved through assignation of that sentience, and therefore the quality of sentience and the volume of sentience is associated with what we are capable of doing. Other levels of sentience can grow and move to different levels of sentience. So the animal can go to the backfill, or it can go to the human level, for example. I mean, the human level is just one body type, by the way. So for listeners, don't just think the human body is the be all and end all. There's millions of different body types that we can incarnate into. It's just that we can relate to the human type because that's what we are right now. So if you think of it in terms of human level of incarnated vehicle, not just a human body type, it could be, I don't know, like a lizard if you wanted to, but it's that the capability associated with that body type which counts. And so each of these different volumes of sentience or quality of sentience can move up through interacting with various different aspects of the multiverse. And one of the fastest ways of doing it is to interact with the lowest frequencies associated with the multiverse, which creates the first or the lowest universal environments, which is the physical universe. So it's interesting that, I wouldn't say the source makes mistakes, but it clearly does. and that's the whole point. The whole point of experience is that we whatever we do, we find that we can improve it. And that's in this instance, that's what the source has tried to do. It's created a condition where it's going to accelerate its own evolutionary progression by dividing itself into myriad smaller units, or half of itself into myriad smaller units, along with the environments as well. Another half of its structure. But by not keeping its eye on the ball while it's doing, it allowed the individualization to be diversified into smaller units. It's learning, so are we. So is the origin.
Mm-hmm. Is that reality reflected in any? I know you're not and I'm not trying to get this into religion, but is this reflected in any of the biblical types of stories that we've heard, that there's some kind of metaphor that speaks to what you're talking about in any way? Or
no, the only thing that is alluded to is the different frequential levels, and those that are beyond the physical. They talk about the angels, which are really maintenance entities, to use a modern label, that work on the maintenance of the earth and other parts of the multiverse, and so the different things that some of the religions describe, such as the sentience of God being in different mobiles or whatever, and then the different entities and the different ascended masters, is simply an understanding in a very limited way that there's a hierarchical structure of entities or individualizations of sentience that has chosen to be of service to those who want to be in the evolutionary cycle, to assist their source. So they assist us being in this evolutionary cycle. So there is levels of understanding of, shall I say, the structure, which was explained in very simple language because we didn't have the education. Mm-hmm. And that which has continued through. It's quite clear that we didn't have the education. Even things like Muhammad and Buddha and Jesus, they explain things in stories because people didn't have the capability of understanding, the deep knowledge that they knew, or attained through meditation or given through channeling information, for example. but there are some aspects that come out. For instance, some of the Hindu texts from the Vedas, for example, they do have a better understanding of the sort of the technical aspect of our environment and our creator. So they're probably the better route in to understanding in a more modern way. But even they're limited because again they were dealing with individuals who didn't have the same level of understanding that we do now. And to be honest, even though we think we understand a lot, we don't. we're on the pinhead. We're on the tip, the pointy bit of a pin, which is joined to an iceberg.
Yeah, I think your quote in one of the I wrote down was, limitation is in the mind of the entity, not in the actuality of its ability.
Yeah, exactly.